So we had some last minute changes on the presenter. So Michele Loy was originally supposed to do that, or together with me, so he cannot be here today, so I'll try to replace him. But Markus Christen is here from this guy here from University of Zurich, who is one of the main drivers of that thing here. So you see some names here, and this is what I'm going to present to you is joint work actually, and a lot of people are involved, much more than are listed here. But those here are the authors of a paper that we wrote for the proceedings about this code, and this is what I want to present here. So towards an ethical code for database business. This is a project that comes out of the alliance here actually, and it comes out of the data ethics expert group. We're running that group with about 20 to 25 people. We're working together since 2 years on ethical questions around database value creation. And in fall 2018, we thought it's some ethical guidelines for doing business with data are needed, and they are not around. So we thought we would go for that and then create something. And the goal was to provide an easy-to-use guideline for companies that are doing business based on data, helping them to deal with the ethical questions that arise. We try to tackle two things. And to cover two things. One is what are the most important ethical questions when you work with data as a company, and how can we transfer that, how can we derive some recommendations in the form of do's and don'ts. And this is what's covered in the code. So we had more than 30 persons involved here in that process, from companies and universities in Switzerland here. The expertise included ethics, of course, but also law and a lot of technology, because we felt that it's really necessary that people that are doing the work with the data are really involved here. So we had several workshops, we had a lot of conference calls, and we have just published the first version of the code, and this is now available since a few days on our website, on the Alliance website in English and in German. And you are very much invited to provide comments on that. It's the first version, and we want to improve on that. So we'll start a consultation procedure. What did we do here, and how did we build it up? First of all, we did not start from a philosophical, let's say, discussion. What are the basic values that we might think of, and how would that transfer into recommendations? We start with practice. And this is something that comes from Aristotle. So Michele wrote that. He knows about that. So you know what it is. So this is a kind of a reflection method coming from practice and trying to boil it down into recommendations. So we started with that, and the first thing is that we kind of try to identify who is working with data, with which idea, and which was activity, and we came up with this 4-step procedure that we saw, that we will see as a generic procedure that happens in companies who are at the end providing database service. First of all, you need some data acquisition. Then you need to store data and manage the data that you have, and privacy, for example, is something that is based here. Then you take the data and derive some knowledge out of that, or information or wisdom or whatever. And then you take that knowledge and create value out there in the world, and you create value by implementing that or deploying that in a product or a service. So this is how it works, and then if you do that, then you will have an impact on individuals, hopefully a positive one, but maybe also a negative one, and you will have an impact on society. What we found out is that the ethical questions differ very much depending on where you are and what you're doing. So, for example, here, this is the area of IT management, so the central IT department of a company who's caring for that. This is where the most of the people here in the conference are probably based. These are the data scientists and the analysts trying to make sense out of data. And here, this is the area of product owners who are deploying a new product and are trying to make money with that. So we tried to sort that somehow, and we saw that this four-step procedure that we never found, by the way, in any other ethical code that we tried to identify among the existing ones. That four-step procedure turned out to be very useful for kind of making, let's say, creating some order into that chaos of ethical questions. But we also found that the 4 steps are not enough. We need something like an overarching step as well. And this step is what holds those steps together, basically, and make sure that all the decisions that are made here are kind of synchronized and lead to a good end. So I'm going to go through all those 5 steps, and I can only shortly touch on the content itself. And for those of you who want to know more about the specific content and all the do's and don'ts, I really invite you to our session at 3:30, I guess, the ethical poker game. And I'll explain that later as well. So, but this is the basic structure that we created here. First step, data acquisition and generation. So this is a step where we kind of collect data. We might collect data from persons via our website, for example, data from machines, data crawling the web, for example, hearing something, seeing something. This is data creation here, and at the end we have a set of data. Right? This is the very first step, and here we have some special ethical questions. What we try to do is to formulate 3 ethical principles for each of those steps. And those are indicated here on the left, and then derive some recommendations from those principles. Those principles, in that case here, for example, the principle is transparency. When you collect data, especially when it comes from persons, be transparent on what you're doing and why you're doing it. Give people control. Make sure that they have a choice, for example, with which data they give and which data they do not give, and give them some autonomy here. So based on those ethical principles, we derive recommendations, and as I said, it's a bit more detailed than what you're seeing here. But for example, something about metadata. When you collect data, typically this data is there are some limitations in terms of for what you can use that. I mean, if you have a website, people fill in their information, then today you have to explain what you're going to do with that data. So there's a statement: we use this data for this and this purpose. Now, this is something that is binding, right? That means if you take that data and go over all of those 4 steps, and at the end doing something with the data and deploying a service, you have to make sure that what you do in between is really allowed by your data provider, right? So, and you can only do that with storing some metadata. Where does this data come from? What is allowed for that? And I assume you have a situation that's very common. You take data from here, you take data from here, you combine that, you create a new set of data, and those different sets do have different restrictions. How do you deal with that? But this is what you, from an ethical perspective, you have to do, based on control, for example. Value for data, you should. This is one of the recommendations that we give. If you get or retrieve data from your customers that is not necessarily needed for providing the service, you might do that because you have some plans, strategic development things, for example. It might make sense, but then give them back an adequate value for that. So these are just 2 examples. So this is how it is then written out here. For example, there's one example for a do and one for a don't. That's not part of the code text here. Reciprocity is one of the do's. Engage your clients if you want to get more data from them than the minimum that is strictly necessary for providing the service. Engage your clients in that case. And if they give you their consent to collect unnecessary data, this means data that is not right now necessary for providing the service, then they should obtain some adequate value, and this is not necessarily money. Opacity here, this is don't be opaque. Do not use, for example, long and complex terms and conditions. Let's say this 15-page terms and conditions where at the end you say, and by the way, this is what we are going to do. And maybe not at the end, but maybe on page 10, somewhere here, right? Do not do that. Give clear explanations and explain important information clearly. So this is not something that does not come from a legal requirement. This is not written in the law. Written in the law, it's written. We should explain that. But the ethical and the moral requirement here is to do it such that an average person really can understand it. Collaborate with other companies to generate new standards for more readable, understandable, and classifiable terms and references. Those are just 2 out of 9 do's and don'ts that we formulated in that first step. Second step, data storage and management. Now we have collected the data. What we're doing is we store it on our system and we give access to that, to that data. So this is the step where privacy and security comes in. So one of the big ethical clouds, problem clouds, is who is going to see my data, especially for personal data, but also for, let's say, you store data of other companies, for example, or usage data from machines. Who is going to see that? Is it secure there? Is privacy protected? Confidentiality guaranteed? And here again we have source traceability, so make sure that you can trace your source. Give transparency. Think about data lifetime. For example, is there a point where, and this is something that has to do with storage, is there a point in time where you would like to delete that because it makes sense? And if so, did you communicate that to your customer? So if you cannot delete that due to some regulations, for example, did you inform your customers that you are going to store the data for the next 100 years? So these are questions in that step. Third point, the data science part, creating knowledge out of data. So input is the stored data that we have, and output is some sort of model or some sort of information. Now, here we have, let's say, 2 clusters or 2 basic, let's say, ethical ideas. One is make adequate use of models. Myself, I'm working daily with models based on data, and I'm trying to do that work. And I know, as you know, making not inadequate use of models creates an output that might be wrong, that might be inadequate, that might be misleading, and this for itself is not a problem first, but then if somebody else uses that and builds a business on that, then you might have big damage there. And it's the responsibility of the data scientists here doing a good, solid job here. Let's say, really thinking about what can this kind of model explain and what not, for example. Fairness is another thing. You might have heard about algorithmic bias, the problem that models might be unfair, that might, let's say, give worse recommendations about the sort, let's say, about women than about men. So this is kind of unfairness. Models, we know that models tend to have something, create such unfairness. And if that unfairness is implemented, deployed then at the end in the real world, then we really create some damage there. But it is not the responsibility, or let's say it's a responsibility of the product owner at the end. Yes, but it's not within his realm of expertise, and it's the expertise of the data scientist that is needed here to make sure that what comes out in terms of a model is fair, or at least as fair as possible. So explain bias and remove unfairness. Explain limits, for example. If you create a model, then make sure that anyone who uses that model it understands the limits of that model, and not just uses that, because, well, this is the model, and then now I put that together with something else, and the business model for making money. Well, this is going to have a bad effect at the end. Okay, explainability. You see that this part is part of most ethical and legal recommendations, for example, in the GDPR, in the European GDPR right now. Fourth step, deployment of a database product or service. First, we focused on individuals. What is the impact on the individuals? And here, ethically, what we're looking at is here, what happens if we deploy that service? What happens with the people using it or people being involved of that? For example, you have an algorithm that gives or refuses a loan. What is it? I mean, does it do this in a fair way, for example? And here we have kind of different recommendations. For example, check the model limits. As a product owner, you have to ask your model creator and say, what are the limits of the model? If I use it in that way that I plan to, does it really make sense, or might something unreasonable come out of it? In a similar way, we can think about consequences of society. And the example, I was very happy that Alexandra told us about that example from, what is it, OpenAI? This company that withdraw an artificial intelligence solution because they thought it might damage our society. So this is something that is relevant here. So we have to look at stakeholders, at dual or unwanted uses that we might make possible just because we provide that. Implementing ethical governance is what I told before, and make sure that all decisions that are made in those 4 steps, decisions on how to store data, how to give access, which model to use, for example. All those decisions must be aligned and fit together, such that at the end, at the outcome, you have a service that has a high ethical standard. For example, the IT department might be a great job in security and privacy protection. The modeler may be the best modeling job ever, and then is super clear with his model. And then there's no unfairness and everything in the deployed service at the end. But the data is maybe illegally used. Then at the end you will have something that has not a high ethical standard. So every step in that chain must be on the same ethical level if you want to, and this has to be ensured and has to be implemented here. Okay, last slide. What are we going to go for? First thing, join us today in the 3:30 in track 7 in Bella Vista 4. We will have the data ethics all-in poker round, and we'll have kind of a gamification scene prepared for you. We'll play poker, and we poker with the do's and don'ts, basically. And yes, you can win something. So here's a high prize set out. Second thing, as I told, we have this Vernehmlassung of the code, so we want to improve on that, and please check our website. Not today, unfortunately. We wanted to have it implemented today, but we will need us some more days. But then you can give some feedback over our website, but you can also already download the code. Our plan is that we have a final version of the code in fall 2019. And some implementation guidelines in 2020. And with that, we hope we can support businesses here in Switzerland to create data products and create value generation based on data with a high ethical standard. Not only a good technical standard and a good business model, but also with a high ethical standard compatible with the values of our society, because we are convinced that on the long run this is needed both for individual businesses as well as for the whole industry in order to get sustainable and good development and create more benefit than harm at the end. Thank you very much, and hope we have some time for questions.